"No man wants me," said the young Apache woman, and Cowboy took her to live with him. The sun had just begun to dip behind the distant hills, casting a golden glow over the quiet town at the edge of the Apache lands. Dust rose gently from the dirt roads, and the air smelled faintly of sage and dry earth. A young Apache woman named Ayana walked slowly along the path that led to the river, her bare feet brushing against the warm sand. She carried a small clay jar, its surface chipped from years of use, holding the water she had fetched from the well near her family's cabin. Ayana's mind was heavy with thoughts she rarely shared with anyone. At 17, she already knew what it felt like to be unseen, to be considered unworthy by the very people who were supposed to care for her. Her beauty, which some might have admired, had not brought her happiness. Instead, it had made her a target for whispers and judgments. "No man wants me," she said quietly to herself, almost as if speaking aloud would make the truth any easier to bear. She lowered her gaze to the ground, watching the shadows stretch across the riverbank. The river sparkled in the fading sunlight, reflecting the colors of the sky. Ayana knelt at the edge and dipped the jar into the cool water. She felt the smooth current slip through her fingers and thought about how quickly life could flow past her if she did nothing to hold on to it. Her heart ached with loneliness. She had grown up hearing the stories of young Apache women being admired, chosen, and celebrated by men in the community, but for her, those stories had always been distant. She had tried to ignore the pain of being left out, but it followed her like a shadow, reminding her with every passing day that she was somehow different, somehow unwanted. As she straightened to lift the jar, she noticed movement at the edge of the woods. A man appeared, tall and broad-shouldered, with a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. He looked like he had stepped out of the stories her father had once told her about cowboys who roamed the plains, brave and independent. The man's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Ayana felt a flicker of curiosity mixed with caution. She had learned long ago to be wary of strangers, especially men from outside her community. The man came closer, his steps careful on the soft earth. He spoke, his voice calm and steady, in words she could understand. "Evening. Are you all right?" Ayana hesitated. She had not expected kindness, only curiosity or judgment. I'm fine," she replied softly, clutching the jar a little tighter. The man nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'm Tom," he said, offering a hand in greeting. "I just moved here. I saw you at the river. Do you come here often?" Ayana shook her head slightly. "Yes, sometimes. It's quiet here." She glanced at the water, reluctant to reveal too much. Tom smiled gently. "I like quiet places too," he said. There was a pause, filled only by the gentle rush of the river and the distant calls of birds settling in for the night. "I don't mean to intrude," he continued, "but you seem sad. Is there anything I can do?" Ayana looked at him, studying his face. There was no mockery, no impatience. There was simply concern. For the first time in a long while, she felt a strange mix of relief and fear. She had been hurt before, dismissed by people she trusted, yet here was a stranger, offering help without demand, without expectation. "No one wants me," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "No man wants me." The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy all at once. Tom did not flinch. He did not turn away. Instead, he knelt beside her, his eyes gentle. "I see you," he said simply. "And I don't think that's true. You are not invisible." Ayana felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. No one had said anything like that to her before. People had whispered that she was unlucky, that she would remain alone, that she was somehow broken. But here was someone who looked at her with respect, with attention, without judgment. She wanted to believe him, yet a part of her feared that hope always faded too quickly. I don't know, she murmured, unsure if she could trust herself to speak more. I've tried to be like everyone else, but it never works. I'm not like them. I'm just me. Tom nodded slowly. And that's enough, he said. You don't have to be like anyone else to matter. You already do. Ayana blinked at him, struck by the simplicity of his words. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, to explain why she wasn't enough. But instead, she found herself taking a small step closer. Why do you care? She asked. Because everyone deserves someone to notice them, Tom replied. Sometimes that someone is a friend. Sometimes it can become more. But it always starts with being seen. Ayana felt a spark of warmth in her chest. The sun had dipped lower now, and the sky was painted with shades of pink and orange. She realized that staying at the river, watching the water, thinking about her loneliness would not change anything. But maybe, just maybe, talking to someone who listened could. Tom stood slowly and offered her his hand. Come with me, he said. It's just a little ways from here. I can give you something warm to eat. No pressure, no questions you're not ready to answer. Just, a warm meal and a place to rest for a while. Ayana hesitated. Her mind raced with doubts and fears. Could she trust him? Could she risk showing her heart to someone new? But the kindness in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice, she placed her hand in his, feeling the rough calluses of work and strength, and together they walked toward his cabin, leaving the river and the fading day behind them. The cabin was small but sturdy, with a warm fire already burning in the hearth. Tom gestured for her to sit by the fire while he prepared a simple meal of bread, stew, and fresh water. Ayana watched as he moved around the kitchen, careful, methodical, and unhurried. It was a rhythm she had never known. Someone acting with care, not haste, not indifference, but with purpose and thoughtfulness. They ate in silence at first, listening to the crackle of the fire. Then Tom began to speak gently, asking questions about her life, about her family, about her experiences. Ayana shared what she could, telling him about her father who worked long hours in the fields, her mother who had passed when Ayana was young, and the small joys she found in weaving and helping her grandmother with herbs and remedies. Tom listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice unless she asked. He simply listened, nodding, encouraging her to continue. And with each story, Ayana felt the weight on her shoulders lighten slightly. She began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: acceptance. When the meal was finished, Tom cleaned up quietly while Ayana sat by the fire, staring into the flames. She thought about the river, about the loneliness she had carried, and about the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this cabin, to this man who saw her as she truly was. "Thank you," she said softly, almost afraid to break the fragile peace. "For what?" Tom asked, not looking at her but still aware of her presence. "For listening." "For caring?" she replied. Tom smiled. "You don't have to thank me. Everyone deserves someone to care." The fire crackled, and the night deepened. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of sage and earth. Inside, Ayana felt a small spark of hope ignite. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or the days after that, but for the first time she felt the possibility of belonging. As she finally lay down on the simple cot Tom had offered, She realized that perhaps her journey wasn't about being wanted by everyone or fitting into expectations she could never meet. Perhaps it was about finding someone who saw her, truly saw her, and allowed her to be herself. And in that quiet cabin with the fire fading to embers and the night stretching wide and endless, Ayana felt the first true peace she had known in a long time. The morning sun filtered through the small cabin's wooden windows, casting warm, golden streaks across the room. Ayana woke to the smell of fresh bread and coffee brewing. She rubbed her eyes and realized that, for the first time in many weeks, she had slept without the weight of worry pressing on her chest. The cabin felt calm, safe, and alive in a way she had never experienced in her own home. Tom was already moving about, arranging the small kitchen, humming a quiet tune under his breath. He looked up and gave her a smile that made her stomach flutter with something she could not yet name. "Morning," he said. "I made enough for both of us. Sit, eat, and we can plan the day." Ayana hesitated, unused to someone offering her food without expectation or judgment. She moved to the small wooden table and sat down, feeling both nervous and comforted at the same time. As they ate, Tom asked her simple questions about her interests. "Do you like weaving?" he asked, pointing to a small loom in the corner of the room. Ayana's eyes brightened. "I do," she said softly. "I learned from my grandmother. She taught me patterns and how to make colors tell a story." "That sounds amazing," Tom said, genuinely interested. "I'd love to see it sometime." The simple acknowledgement filled Ayana with pride. For so long her talents had been overlooked or dismissed. Here was someone who actually wanted to understand, to notice her skills and her perspective. She felt warmth spread through her chest, not the ache of loneliness, but a quiet, steady comfort. After breakfast, Tom suggested they step outside to check on the small animals he kept on his property. Ayana followed him, carrying a basket for gathering eggs and feeding the chickens. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wildflowers and dew. The sun had risen fully now, illuminating the fields stretching beyond the cabin, their golden grasses swaying in the gentle breeze. As they worked together, a rhythm formed between them. Ayana fed the animals while Tom repaired a small fence near the barn. Their hands brushed occasionally, and each time a small spark of connection flickered. Ayana found herself laughing softly at Tom's quiet jokes, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in months. "See," Tom said, handing her a bundle of fresh herbs he had picked. "Even the little things can bring joy. You just have to notice them." Ayana smiled, taking the herbs. I think I am learning that," she admitted. She realized that being outside, working with her hands, sharing small moments with someone who cared, was beginning to heal parts of her she had long ignored. Days turned into weeks, and the routine of working together and sharing meals slowly built trust between them. Tom never asked for more than she was willing to give. He never pried into her heart or demanded explanations for her past. He simply offered steady companionship, a safe place to be herself. And in doing so, he gave her the freedom to discover her own strength. One afternoon, as they gathered firewood near the edge of the forest, a sudden storm blew in. Dark clouds rolled across the sky and wind whipped through the trees. The first heavy drops of rain fell, soaking Ayana's hair and clothes. She slipped on the wet ground, losing her balance near the edge of the riverbank. Tom's strong hands shot out, gripping her arm and pulling her back to safety. "Careful," he shouted over the roar of the rain. "I've got you." Ayana's heart pounded as she looked up at him, seeing the concern etched across his face. For a moment, the storm around them seemed to vanish, leaving only the two of them, connected in a silent understanding that went beyond words. Her chest swelled with a mix of relief and gratitude. She realized she trusted him, truly trusted him, in a way she had never trusted anyone. The rain eased, leaving the earth damp and fragrant. They walked back to the cabin, laughing at their soaked clothes and the muddy path. By the time they reached the door, Ayana's spirits felt lighter, her confidence growing with each shared experience. Inside the cabin, they dried off and warmed themselves by the fire. Ayana noticed that she no longer felt the gnawing fear of being unwanted. She felt seen. She felt valued. And she realized that these moments, small, quiet, and ordinary, were teaching her something profound. That connection and trust were not about being perfect or beautiful or accepted by everyone. They were about being real, honest, and open to someone who cared. Over the next few weeks, Ayana began to open up even more about her life. She told Tom about her mother, who had passed away when she was a child, leaving her to navigate the world without the comfort of a guiding hand. She spoke of her father, who worked long hours in the fields and could offer little more than practical advice and expectations. She shared her dreams, her small hopes, and even her fears. Tom listened, never interrupting, never judging. "Your story matters," he said one evening as they sat by the fire, "and I'm glad you shared it with me." And of quiet courage, it meant all dark courage. She realized that trust, like a fragile plant, needed care and patience to grow. Tom's patience, his respect, his steady presence was nurturing something inside her she had almost forgotten existed: hope. She also began to teach him small things about her world. She showed him how to weave patterns with meaning, how to recognize herbs and their uses, and how to listen to the land for signs of changing weather. Tom was a quick learner, and he listened with genuine interest, asking questions and practicing carefully. Ayana found herself enjoying the role of teacher, discovering that her knowledge had value and that sharing it could bring her joy. One evening, while they were sitting outside watching the sunset, Ayana turned to Tom. "I feel different," she said quietly. "I feel like I am not alone." Tom smiled, his eyes reflecting the orange and pink of the sky. "You are not alone," he said simply. "You haven't been alone since you came here, and you won't be again." Ayana's heart lifted at his words. For so long she had believed that her life would always be marked by isolation, by whispers of rejection, by the feeling that she didn't belong anywhere. Now she was beginning to see that belonging could be found in the simplest of things, in shared meals, in laughter, in trust, and in the quiet understanding that someone was there for her unconditionally. Their days continued in this rhythm, tending to the animals, working the small garden, gathering firewood, and sharing stories. Each day brought small victories, small moments of connection that strengthened their bond. Ayana's laughter became more frequent, her voice more confident, and her heart lighter. She discovered that life could be kind, even in a world that had often been harsh. One afternoon, Tom asked her to help him repair the barn roof. Ayana hesitated at first, unsure of her abilities, but Tom encouraged her gently. "You can do this," he said. "I'll be right here if you need me." Together they worked, climbing ladders carefully, passing tools back and forth, and laughing at minor slips and mistakes. By the end of the day, they stood on the roof, looking out over the fields and the distant hills. Ayana felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. She realized that strength was not just physical, it was about courage, patience, and trust. And in these moments, she had found all three. Evenings were often spent by the fire, sharing meals and stories. Ayana would sometimes play simple tunes on a small wooden flute, and Tom would listen quietly, letting the music fill the cabin with a sense of peace. They shared dreams for the future, hopes that were small and practical at first, but growing bolder with each passing day. Ayana began to envision a life where she was valued, where she could contribute and belong, and where her heart could feel safe. Through all of this, Tom never pressured her. He never demanded her affection or loyalty. He simply offered a steady presence, a safe place, and a hand to hold when the world felt overwhelming. And Ayana, in turn, began to realize that love could be quiet and gentle, not loud or demanding. It could grow in small, consistent moments, nurtured by patience, respect, and understanding. By the end of the second month, Ayana was no longer the young woman who whispered, "No man wants me." She was growing into someone confident in her own worth, someone who understood that being wanted by everyone was not the goal. Being valued by someone who truly saw her was far more important. She had found that person in Tom, a man who had entered her life quietly, offering only kindness, and who had given her the greatest gift she had ever received: trust. And so, life continued in its quiet, beautiful way. The sun rose and set over the plains, the seasons began to shift, and Ayana grew stronger with each passing day. She laughed more freely, spoke her mind with more confidence, and found joy in the simplest things: the shared meal, the rhythm of work, the glow of the fire, and the quiet presence of a man who had seen her when no one else had. In these days, Ayana learned that life could be gentle, that the heart could heal, and that even in a world filled with whispers and judgments, there could be a place of warmth, safety, and belonging. And in the company of Tom, she began to understand that being seen, truly seen, was the first step to finding hope, strength, and perhaps, one day, a love that would last a lifetime. The days grew warmer as spring arrived, painting the plains with shades of green and gold. Flowers began to bloom along the riverbanks, and the air carried the fresh scent of new life. Ayana and Tom had settled into a comfortable rhythm, their days filled with work on the cabin, tending the small garden, and caring for the animals. Yet, as life outside the cabin seemed calm and peaceful, the world beyond their small sanctuary was beginning to notice their unusual companionship. It started with whispers in town. People had begun to see Ayana more frequently at Tom's cabin, helping with chores, carrying baskets of eggs, or walking beside him through the fields. The gossip was gentle at first, mostly curiosity, but soon questions arose. "Why is she always with him?" some asked. Others whispered, "Does he mean to take her in as his own?" Ayana had never cared much for the opinions of strangers, but the murmurs carried a weight of judgment she could not entirely ignore. She worried for the first time that her bond with Tom might not be understood. She turned to him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. "Tom," she said hesitantly, "people are talking. I don't know what they think, but I feel like they are judging me." Tom turned to her, his expression calm but serious. "Let them talk," he said. "We don't live for their approval. We live for truth. You are here, you are safe, and you are valued. That's what matters." Ayana felt a small wave of relief. She trusted Tom more than anyone, and yet the world's opinions were hard to ignore. But as she looked at him, steady and unwavering, she realized he was right. Their lives, their bond, did not need to be justified to anyone. Still, some days were harder than others. Certain neighbors would stare as she walked past, or ask questions with thinly veiled suspicion. Ayana tried not to let it bother her, but the weight of being different, of being judged, sometimes pressed heavily on her shoulders. Tom noticed this and responded with gentle care. "Remember," he said one afternoon as they repaired a section of the fence near the river, "the world does not define your worth. You define it yourself." She nodded, gripping the hammer a little tighter. feeling strength return to her hands and heart. She was learning that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to keep moving forward despite it. Outside the cabin, the natural world continued to flourish. Birds sang in the trees, rabbits darted through the fields, and the river sparkled in the sunlight. Ayana began to find joy in these small details, moments that reminded her life could be beautiful, even when challenges loomed. She noticed the way the wind carried the scent of wildflowers, the way bees busily moved from blossom to blossom, and the warmth of the sun on her face. Tom encouraged her to explore the land around the cabin. He showed her the best places to gather herbs, how to read the signs of the weather, and how to track the movement of animals in the fields. Each day brought new lessons, and with each lesson, Ayana's confidence grew. She was not just surviving, she was learning, creating, and becoming part of a life that felt purposeful and meaningful. One day, as they were walking along a narrow path leading to a grove of oak trees, Ayana stumbled over a loose stone. Tom reached for her immediately, catching her by the arm before she could fall. They laughed at the near mishap, but in that moment, Ayana felt a surge of gratitude. She realized that safety, trust, and companionship were more precious than she had ever imagined. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but sincere. "For what?" Tom asked, smiling. "For noticing me," she said. "For being here. For caring." Tom's expression softened. "Always," he said. "You don't have to ask for it. I am here, and I will always be here." Despite the growing judgment from outsiders, their bond strengthened. Ayana began to see that love, respect, and trust were not about public approval, but about the quiet moments shared between two people who truly cared for each other. She realized that Tom's companionship was a gift that went far beyond protection or kindness. It was a partnership built on understanding, patience, and genuine concern. However, not every day was without challenges. Some members of the Apache community were hesitant to accept her connection with Tom. They questioned her choices, fearing that she might be influenced or taken advantage of by an outsider. Ayana faced subtle pressure to conform to expectations she no longer wished to follow. She found herself caught between two worlds, the one she had grown up in, where judgment and tradition often ruled, and the one she was building with Tom, where respect and freedom guided every decision. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Ayana spoke her heart. "I sometimes feel like I don't belong anywhere," she admitted. "Not in my own community, and yet not fully with you either. I want to be accepted, but I don't know how to balance it." Tom listened carefully. "Belonging doesn't always come from others," he said. "It comes from within. You belong because you know your worth, because you honor yourself, and because you allow people who care to stand beside you." Her heart lifted at his words. She began to understand that the judgments of others could not define her life. She could build her own world, grounded in respect, trust, and the courage to follow her own path. Life continued in small, meaningful ways. Ayana learned to bake bread from scratch, to mend fences, and to help Tom with the care of the animals. She discovered her own talents and strengths, skills that had long been overlooked or dismissed. And as she grew more confident, she began to teach Tom some of her own knowledge: how to weave patterns that told stories, how to recognize edible plants in the wild, and how to move quietly across the land without disturbing the creatures that lived there. Their days were filled with shared labor, laughter, and quiet reflection. Ayana noticed that she was no longer defined by the whispers of those who had once judged her. She had become a young woman with purpose, courage, and hope, someone who could face the world on her own terms. Evenings were often spent sitting outside, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Tom would share stories of his past, of travels across the plains, and of small adventures he had experienced in distant towns. Ayana listened, captivated by the tales, but also by the sense of security and trust they shared. The more she understood Tom, the more she realized that connection and loyalty were built not on grand gestures, but on everyday acts of care and attention. One particular evening, after a long day of work in the garden, they sat together by the fire. Ayana picked up a small flute she had brought from her childhood and played a gentle tune. The music floated into the night, mingling with the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. Tom listened quietly, letting the melody fill the space between them. In that moment, Ayana realized that she was happy, not in a fleeting way, but deep in her heart. She was beginning to feel whole. As the season progressed, the outside world continued to notice their bond. Some neighbors still whispered, and certain members of her community remained wary, but Ayana no longer let it disturb her peace. She had found a foundation that was stronger than gossip or judgment. She had Tom, her steady companion, and together they were creating a life defined by respect, trust, and understanding. Ayana began to embrace her new identity with quiet pride. She no longer saw herself as the young woman who believed no man wanted her. She was a person of value, with skills, knowledge, and a heart capable of trust and love. Tom had shown her that life could be kind, that safety and companionship could exist without demand, and that hope could be nurtured in the simplest of moments. One day, while walking through a sunlit field, they encountered a group of travelers who were passing through the town. Ayana felt a twinge of old fear, the fear of judgment and misunderstanding, but Tom's calm presence reassured her. She realized that she could face the world now, not as someone who needed validation, but as someone confident in her own worth. Tom and Ayana continued their daily work, their bond growing stronger with each shared experience. They celebrated small victories together, a repaired fence, a new crop planted, a litter of chicks hatched. They found joy in the ordinary, recognizing that life's beauty often lay in simplicity and connection. By the end of spring, Ayana had transformed. She was no longer the young Apache woman haunted by whispers and doubt. She was confident, capable, and resilient. She had found belonging not in the approval of others, but in the steady, unwavering companionship of a man who respected her, listened to her, and allowed her to be herself. Together, they faced the challenges of life on the frontier, but they did so with courage, understanding, and mutual care. Ayana realized that love and trust were not about grand declarations, but about consistency, respect, and the willingness to stand beside someone through both calm and storm. And as the days stretched long and warm into summer, Ayana and Tom continued their lives together, building a future that neither of them could have imagined alone. The young Apache woman who once whispered, "No man wants me," had found a place where she was seen, valued, and cherished. And in that place, she discovered the true meaning of home, trust, and connection. Summer had settled fully over the plains, bringing warmth, long days, and soft, golden light that stretched across the fields. The sun rose early, painting the cabin and its surroundings in gentle hues of yellow and orange, and set late, leaving skies filled with pinks and purples that reflected on the river's surface. For Ayana, these long, sunlit days felt different than any she had ever known. They were filled with purpose, laughter, and quiet peace, a life she had never imagined possible before meeting Tom. She moved around the cabin with ease now, carrying baskets of herbs, checking on the chickens, and tending to the garden with skill and confidence. Her hands were strong from work, her back straightened by pride, and her eyes brightened by the sense of belonging she had learned to embrace. Tom, meanwhile, worked beside her, never asking her to do more than she could, always offering guidance when needed, and always treating her as an equal. Life outside the cabin had become more accepting, if slowly. Some of the townsfolk who had whispered about Ayana's relationship with Tom now saw the care, respect, and harmony between them. Curiosity and skepticism had softened into quiet admiration. People began to notice that Ayana was thriving, laughing more freely, speaking her mind with confidence, and taking part in the life of the community in small but meaningful ways. Even in her own community, some elders began to recognize her courage. They had once whispered that she was unlucky, but now they saw a young woman who had weathered judgment and hardship with dignity. They saw someone who had grown stronger, wiser, and capable of making her own choices. And while not everyone fully understood her bond with Tom, they could not deny the respect he showed her and the way he valued her voice and talents. Ayana and Tom's days continued in a rhythm of shared work and quiet joy. They repaired fences, gathered firewood, planted crops, and cared for animals. Each task was an opportunity for collaboration, for learning, and for laughter. Ayana taught Tom the traditional patterns of weaving she had learned from her grandmother, showing him how each line and color carried meaning. He listened carefully, practicing patiently, often with his tongue peeking out in concentration. Watching him try, then succeed, made her laugh in a way that felt free and true. They shared meals together, simple yet nourishing, sitting by the fire and talking about everything from small daily happenings to dreams for the future. Sometimes Ayana would play her flute while Tom listened, letting the music fill the cabin with a quiet joy. Other times, Tom would tell stories of his youth, of travels across distant towns and plains, of the small lessons he had learned from life. These exchanges became a cherished part of their routine, moments that strengthened their bond and reminded them of the value of companionship. One warm afternoon, as they walked along the riverbank collecting wild herbs, Ayana paused to watch a small group of birds flit between the reeds. The sunlight caught their feathers, making them shine like tiny jewels. She felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. For so long she had believed that the world was cold, that people could not be trusted, and that she would always be alone. But now she realized life could be kind. Life could offer warmth, safety, and the joy of being seen. Tom noticed her quiet reflection and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Ayana turned to him, her eyes bright. "I'm thinking that maybe life isn't so lonely after all," she said. "That maybe there's a place for me, where I can be myself and still be valued." Tom reached out and took her hand gently. "There is a place," he said, "and you've built it yourself, with courage, patience, and an open heart. I just helped you see it." The bond between them had grown deeper over the months, evolving into something neither rushed nor forced. Ayana no longer feared attachment because she had learned that trust and love were not about possession or control, but about respect, care, and being present. She trusted Tom completely, and he trusted her in return. They had become partners in every sense of the word, sharing not just the work of survival, but the joys, sorrows, and quiet wonders of life. One evening, as they sat outside watching the stars emerge one by one, Ayana spoke softly. "I never thought I could feel this way," she said. "Like I belong somewhere, like someone sees me for who I really am." Tom nodded, looking up at the sky with her. "You've always been seen, Ayana. You just didn't know it yet. Sometimes it takes time and the right person to remind us." The nights were peaceful, filled with the sounds of crickets, the soft rustle of leaves, and the distant murmur of the river. Ayana often thought about her past, the feelings of isolation, the whispers of judgment, and the long days of longing for acceptance. But now those memories felt distant, like shadows fading with the dawn. She had found safety, companionship, and the knowledge that she was valued. Life in the cabin also brought lessons in resilience. Not every day was easy. Storms would come, sometimes harsh winds or sudden downpours that made chores difficult. Yet, even in these moments, Ayana felt strength she had never known before. She learned to adapt, to persevere, and to find calm amidst challenges. And through it all, Tom was there, not to rescue her, but to stand beside her, sharing in both work and worry, offering guidance without taking control. Ayana's confidence continued to grow. She began to make small contributions to the wider community, sharing herbs and remedies she had learned from her grandmother, offering help with weaving and lending her skills to neighbors in need. People who once doubted her began to see her as capable, wise, and resilient. And though whispers never fully disappeared, they no longer carried the power to define her. As summer drew to a close, the plains shimmered with golden light, and the first hints of autumn approached. Ayana walked with Tom through the fields one evening, feeling the soft brush of grass against her legs and the warmth of the sun on her back. "I never imagined life could be like this," she said quietly. "I feel happy, safe, proud." Tom looked at her, his expression full of quiet pride. "You've worked for this," he said. "You've earned it, and now you can enjoy it without fear or doubt." Ayana realized how much she had grown, from a young woman who whispered, "No man wants me," to someone who understood her own value, strength, and potential. She had learned that belonging was not about meeting expectations or pleasing others, but about living authentically, trusting herself, and nurturing connections with those who truly cared. The days that followed were filled with simple pleasures. They harvested vegetables from the garden, repaired fences that had been damaged in summer storms, and gathered firewood for the cooler nights ahead. They laughed often, their joy echoing across the fields, and found contentment in the quiet routines that marked each day. One evening, as they sat by the fire sharing a meal, Ayana looked at Tom and spoke with gentle certainty. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. Dial, cha, for seeing me, for trusting me, for letting me be myself." Tom reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "There's nothing to thank me for," he said. "You've always had strength and courage. I only helped you see it." Ayana smiled, a smile that reached her eyes and warmed her entire being. She realized that life had given her more than she had dared to hope for: a safe home, a loving companion, and the confidence to face the world with courage and grace. The first hints of autumn arrived slowly, turning the leaves to shades of red, gold, and amber. Ayana and Tom continued their daily work, their bond unshaken by the changing seasons. They celebrated the small victories: a harvest completed, an animal cared for, a fence repaired, and found joy in the quiet beauty of the world around them. Ayana had learned the meaning of resilience, trust, and true companionship. She no longer feared judgment or rejection because she had found something far more enduring: a partnership built on respect, care, and love. And in this partnership, she discovered her own strength, her own voice, and her own happiness. In the final days of summer, they walked together along the riverbank, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills. The water reflected the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, just as it had on the day they first met. Ayana took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun, the gentle breeze on her face, and the steady presence of Tom at her side. She realized that life had transformed completely. The young Apache woman who had once whispered, "No man wants me," had grown into someone confident, valued, and loved. She had discovered that belonging, trust, and happiness were not things given by others, but things nurtured through courage, patience, and connection. Tom squeezed her hand gently. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Ayana smiled. "I am home," she said softly, her heart full. And as they walked back toward the cabin, the plains stretching endlessly before them, Ayana knew that she had found something rare and precious, a life where she was seen, respected, and cherished, and a love built on trust, patience, and quiet, unwavering care. The world beyond the cabin could continue to whisper and wonder, but she no longer needed its approval. She had found her place, her strength, and her companion. And in that knowledge, she felt a peace that would stay with her forever.